Welcome, one and all, to the first game in 2024. It is all set up here on the abandoned monitoring station table in undisclosed parts of Dallas, Texas. We've got the initial setup of the board, and we're going to take a different tack this time around for perhaps the first time, I think, in recorded Axis and Allies history. This is not going to be a Chris versus Brian game. This is going to be a Chris and Brian special team up against our new friends, Aaron and Mike, I believe it is.
Yep.
And some assistants to have an epic showdown. Aaron is somebody we actually met through this channel originally online, and finally getting a chance to meet up here in Dallas and play a game with his good buddy and gaming partner Mike. So since Chris and I play together so much and those two play together so much, we're actually going to team up against each other. So now for the first time, Chris and I are both going to be playing the Axis, and the idea being that Chris will take lead with Germany and me with Japan. And so we have actually spent the better part of this day, literally almost the entire day, right? Like sitting down, not only in the process of putting this all together, but then sitting down and getting very granular with our strategic planning and decisions. So we thought we'd do a little preview here of some of our strategic thoughts, because some of you folks seem to dig that, and always helps to record our thoughts for future posterity here when we're trying to figure out what to do next year. If you want to skip ahead to gameplay, go ahead and do that. But Chris, you and I have spent hours planning the positions and moves of just about every, not just about, literally every German piece on this board, because that's really the only country that you can plan out in that much detail, right? Because they started all off. So tell us what we came up with.
All right, so a little bit of backstory. Brian and I have always found the out-of-box rules to overwhelmingly favor the Axis on a J1 attack, and that's in fact the impetus for us creating our house rules, was to try to nerf that a little bit and slow it down. We're talking to Aaron and Mike, and they say they overwhelmingly think the out-of-box rules favor the Allies, and that they usually give the Axis a plus 20-ish bid at the beginning of the game. So we took the Axis, and they're taking the Allies, because we're more familiar with our specific rules, which we're playing with. Those guys have never played before. Mm-hmm. But based on their comments that they overwhelmingly win on this rule set that we think favors the Allies, understand that this strategy may go to hell really quick, because I'm not sure exactly what they're doing, but they're doing something apparently we've not thought of before, so I'm excited to see it. But
for sure. Who knows?
The general thought as our opening strategy is to create optionality to both go Sea Lion if it is available, and if not, to sort of shift into Russia. But turn one buy is going to be an aircraft carrier, a destroyer, and a sub. The attacks are going to be these two subs here to get the double surprise shot to try to kill this Navy. The odds calculators tell us we have a 60-ish% shot of wiping that out. These two subs are going into 110 along with virtually every plane that we can. The only three planes that aren't going are the three, this one here, and I think it's this one in Berlin, as I recall.
Yeah, the TAC in
Those
Germany.
Three are going into Yugoslavia. Mm-hmm. The idea is we're going to wipe out this Navy overwhelmingly. If he scrambles and sacrifices his planes, which is suicidal, that opens up Sea Lion even better. We have historically gone for both this Navy and this Navy on turn one. The sort of change in strategy is to leave the Navy in 111 open, not to do anything with it. The sub in 124 will go to 112, Our Navy will be built in 112. This Navy is going to non-com into 112 so that we have up to 5 fighters, 2 on the carrier, 3 that can scramble from Western Germany in defense. And we've run those odds. Even if this Navy, even if he brings this, and all of his planes, we're going to win 100%. That's again going to strip out all of the Air Force, opening up a Sea Lion. This Navy's dead. If he doesn't go into 112 and he moves this Navy back because there's a base here, we can go 1, 2, 3 with the planes on the carrier plus the strat bombers, and suddenly that Navy finds itself in kind of a kill box to begin with. Obviously, all of these units except the planes are going into France. These units, along with those tanks, these land units, and that one plane, these 3 planes are going into Yugoslavia. The one plane will go back up to Western Germany to join up the rest of the Air Force. Attack bomber here for a 3-plane scramble. Fighter to Tobruk to buff the defense, to slow down an Africa token piece. Non-com into Bulgaria to get those guys. Non-com into Finland to get those guys. So the idea, hopefully, if all goes well, is 110 is cleared. That Navy sits there. I have a much stronger Navy in 112, a huge Air Force here, a huge sort of naval presence here for what's going to be the position power of the game. See what happens on the rest of turn 1. I'm going to move those guys up to Poland so that I'm in position to go to Russia if I should decide on turn 2 or 3, because the opportunity presents itself. But in theory, the idea, the main sort of core strategy will be use the money that we get from France, buy a truckload of transports. All these guys will then be in position, because on turn 2, I'll move those guys back here to pick them up. 11 or 12 transports of guys, tanks, mechs into London. That's a token, that's +5. That'll stop him from getting bonuses. And then we've sort of linked that strategy up to at least potentiality of a Calcutta crush on turn 3 or 4 to cripple the UK on both sides of the board. I'll let Brian sort of talk that into the strategy.
Right. So a couple things. So the key differentiator, like you mentioned here, is in the past we've always kind of focused on wiping out 110 and 111 at the same time. Here we've been playing with the idea of how do we split that up by getting rid of 110 first, or at least taking out half that fleet, and so that much more of our own Air Force survives into round 2 and keeping Germany in a stronger position. We played with the idea of getting rid of 111 first and letting 110 live. Problem there being what? That the surviving 110 fleet then has the option of combining up with that cruiser, potentially these guys, and getting down as far as 92. And now that becomes a problematic force for the Italians to have to deal with, especially when they combine down there.
If they don't go here to Taranto and they swing that surviving Navy down here, which they can because there's a zone there, just kill this on your combat, non-com, this Navy, that cruiser, that suddenly is an impenetrable force in the Mediterranean.
Right. Now we've uncorked this Navy and inadvertently made Britain even stronger. So that ended up being a no-go. But turning it around, getting rid of 110, leaving just this 111, which, at first glance, that's a capital ship and 2 strong ships to go with it, combined with this destroyer over here, potentially even that destroyer and that cruiser up there. You think, oh, gee, that's a huge surviving Navy. I'm screwed. But you combine that with a powerful second strike capability in 112, and you're killing the entire British fleet just as handily as you would have in one turn, except you're left in a stronger position at the end of it as Germany, right? You're dominant in that naval area. Plus, I love personally the idea of the psychological half of the game, right? Because now instead of the complete destruction that the UK players used to, all of a sudden they have half their Navy still left. They have a capital ship still by London. They get excited and they want to keep it that much more, right? So they start making bad strategic decisions. The thing they ought to do is still buy a bunch of land units in London to forestall a sea lion attack, right? That's what they should have done anyway when the whole Navy was destroyed. But when they're incentivized to do something else, they might make mistakes. So we'll see how that goes. Like Chris said, we're going to pair that with a, just like we're setting up a sea lion but not committing to it, we're setting up a Kolkata crush here. And obviously playing the game as it unfolds and leaving ourselves multiple off ramps from that strategy too. That's the great thing. All of these setups are archetypes, right? There are only so many basic first moves you can make. And it's a mistake to be committed fully to one strategy and one outcome only, no matter what the other players do, because then you're going to find yourself in a box that other players can take advantage of. The idea is to always stay aware of the game state and be playing the players in the particular game and not the pre-made strategy itself. So to set up for a Kolkata crush, which you've seen it before. This is kind of a UK first strategy, right? Both sides, both Axis powers are focusing on their respective UK players. So the idea being to float a Japanese fleet all the way to Calcutta without declaring war on UK until we get there, right? So that we can bring our entire Navy up to their front door. And in theory, they can't do anything about it without declaring an unprovoked declaration of war against us, and thus giving us free rein to retaliate without bringing the U.S. into the game. So the idea being we'll start off with buying 3 transports and 1 infantry. You could buy an artillery and still have 1 left over. I choose an infantry because I specifically want to have $2 left. We bring these land units, kind of doing a conga line here down along the coast. We're going to take Chahar, Anhui, Hunan, and Yunnan, mostly for the IPCs, though Yunnan itself is the key strategic point. But we're not going to invest a lot in those. We're going to put some infantry there. We're definitely going to make sure that our artillery stay along the coast, and that's because we're going to be using transports to get that artillery all the way down to Kwangsi, which is our kind of rendezvous point. Every air unit I own is going to be supporting these battles down here. Everybody that can reach Hunan or Yunnan is going to come down to support that, and then literally every air unit will be parked in Kwangsi. You've seen this a number of times if you've watched our videos. You've actually seen the UK first strategy work to great effect in a game that I played against somebody else online a few years ago, but we're going to set that up at the beginning. All naval units, like literally every naval unit, is going to go to Sea Zone 36. And then on turn 2, we're going to, we could go 2 ways. It really is dependent on the UK player's reaction. If they at all anticipate this move or react to it in a way that sets them up defensively for it, then we're going to go on a 4-turn Calcutta crush path, aiming for that crush on J4. If they don't see it coming or they make a move that leaves themselves open, it can happen as soon as J3. Assuming we go on a 4-turn path, the next set of buys would be either exactly 6 transports, because we're going to have exactly 42 IPCs to spend, or 5 transports, a guy, and an artillery, or some mixture of those that, buys in those increments in a way that makes sure every transport I own is going to be full. You're going to build those over here in Japan. The 4 transports that are already there, because incidentally, if I didn't mention, the one in Sea Zone 6 there is going to be taking 2 units down. The one in Sea Zone 19 will be taking 2 units down. The one in Sea Zone 20 can't really contribute anything to that carriage that can't already get there by itself. So it's actually on J1 going to go back up to Sea Zone 6. Those 4 units there, the one I brought up and the 3 that I bought, they'll bring a full set of land units down to Kwangsi, Sea Zone 36. I'll be buying 5 or 6 more transports that can then later bring their own set of artillery and infantry down to Kwangsi. The Navy that was there in 36 will mostly swing its way over to 38. I say mostly because we're going to leave some warships back in 36 just to protect those naked transports from an opportunistic attack by the Anzacs or the British. Don't want to lose anything that we don't have to, and that would just be an unforced error. But we're going to split up the warships in a way that gets as much forward capacity as possible without leaving our flank exposed. So either on J2 or J3, depending on which path we're taking, the next buy is to build an air base and a naval base in Kwangsi. Naval base probably going on Hainan just to one step further insulated from attack. But that air base is a specific choice, and under our rules we have both airstrips or air bases, right? One being a smaller version of the other. Under our rules, airstrips are 15 IPCs, which is the normal IPC cost for an air base in the out-of-box rules. For 22, you can get an air base. The difference being, for our paratrooping rule, airstrips can send infantry 2 spaces, air bases can send them 3. And setting it up, that air base there in Kwangsi serves 2 purposes. Either one of those, strip or base, is going to allow planes to go 3 spaces into Calcutta and then be able to move 2 spaces out and land in Yunnan, which of course why Yunnan is so critical to any Calcutta crush strategy, and why we'll be spending all the effort that we can to make sure that we hold it on the Japanese turn before we launch the crush. In fact, if we intend to go on a J3 path and we end up not being able to hold Yunnan from the Chinese, we may be forced to wait until J4 anyway. So the second bit is that air base can then launch 2 more paratroops, 3 spaces into Calcutta, which just adds that many more units onto the invasion. And then subsequently, in the middle of the game, it's shooting paratroopers almost into every Chinese territory available. So that really, I think, is going to be a long-term play that really benefits Japan in gobbling up as many IPCs as possible. The more we've kind of thought through this, unless the opportunity really arises for a J3 crush, J4 just makes a whole lot of sense. In our experience and in our prior games that you can watch, whenever we've tried this move, J3 has certainly succeeded on occasion. The victory comes at a cost, though. I'm usually killing numerous planes just so I have 1 land unit left, usually a tank, to hold that city and take the victory token, or not even the victory token if I don't have the West Indies and Air West India in this version, but at least a bonus and the IPCs, whatever else. But it's such a Pyrrhic victory that usually the Indians are able to take it back. They've got somebody hanging back in West India, or somebody over here who's come through the Middle East from Egypt. There's always a Middle East, Middle Earth kind of presence here for the British, which is something we're going to have to deal with too, depending on how well Italy does. And it's always harder to hold Calcutta than it is to take it. So by being a little bit more patient, walking down that hill instead of running it, we hopefully can take Calcutta with enough force to hold it. So, of course, like I said, strategy has numerous off-ramps. If, for example, Chris is successful in taking London on turn 3, and the U.S. is prepped in the Pacific with a huge naval fleet in Hawaii ready to go, we may see that coming and say, I don't want to send all my fleet to India. Sorry, I think I'm going to hold back a little bit. Or just, any number of moves that...
But that's not the end of the world, because that also means the U.S. had to spend a bunch of buys on this side of the board, which helps Germany keep London if the U.S. isn't looking to, liberate London from Germany. So,
Sure. If they'd rather protect Calcutta than liberate London, then good on them. Absolutely. That's why these 2 strategies are highly complementary. Anything somebody does on the Allies to react on one side is only going to benefit the other in ways that we can play off of. And it may be that Calcutta does something, or a roll goes the wrong way, or the one time a few games ago I was setting up a crush and Chris brought his Anzac Air Force, landed him in Java, trying to get them to India. And I just thought that was too tempting of a target to pass up. So I said, I'm going to deviate from that and kill this Air Force while I still can and take the money islands along the way. Those are all valid choices along the way. Like I said, this is an archetype. It's a general philosophy that you're setting up with Japan. And you don't have to be committed to going all the way to Calcutta. You can save Calcutta to turn 5 or 6 and kind of get there on a slower path. But any way you do it, it's placing that locus of power here in C Zone 36 in Kwang Si, and we've done that a number of times, and it seems to work out pretty well. Anzac could react in a way that leaves them vulnerable. Maybe we decide to jump out there and invade that way instead. It leaves us room to react to how the game progresses. I will say, the probably primary concern with a strategy like this is Russia, right? Because neither of us are putting our efforts initially into Russia. We're both focusing on the UK, which gives it the opportunity to really get aggressive. Certainly, we can anticipate that if Germany telegraphs it's going for a sea lion, Russia usually reacts by just piling on their European front, and they usually make some gains, especially into southern Europe, if they're able to break through the combined defenses there and gobble up some of those countries, maybe even the Nordic countries. And usually Germany is able to fight that back, but that's a big IPC push for Russia too, right? They're getting +2 for each one of those territories. Yeah. And same thing on the Pacific front when Japan has got all its goods down south. These folks here in Amur can pile up into Manchuria. We've seen that before, especially if they're backed up by the Americans. So Russia will give at least one of the Axis powers a run for its money. But the idea is to execute these strategies efficiently enough that we are gaining big IPCs off the UK in a way that lets us then put those to good use against the other allies. Closing thoughts?
If it all works out well on turn 3, we'll take London and Calcutta, get 2 victory token for Germany, victory token for Japan on 4 when you take West India. That's technology on each side, but I somehow suspect that the guys we're playing aren't noobs. They're going to figure out one side of the board or the other and do something that's going to cause us to deviate to something that's not as catastrophic for the Allies. So I could easily see a J2, J3 shift into sort of harder to the money islands, into China, into softer targets, which is fine. Those are high value targets. It just means we'll be looking at Australia earlier, or more naval resources to protect those gains, and then slowly push into Russia, China, and back up some of what we've got in Asia. I mean, the one thing I do think we're going to do is build a military base where that air base is. That's 2 infantry a turn. That you can pop out 3 spaces. I mean, that can reach the Philippines, that can reach one of the money islands, most of China, to be getting Japanese ground forces deeper into China, to be pushing on Russia's back if we need to go that direction. So optionality is sort of the key here.
Right, yeah. A nice little popcorn maker there, right? Just like popping 2 guys out of a military base and then shooting them through an air base 3 spaces away, all through Southeast Asia. And then, that's a great little combo, and that'll be fun. But yeah, well, Aaron and Mike obviously been doing this a long time, and like Chris said, we're kind of excited by the prospect of teaming up against some experienced players who have a lot of experience doing things that we've never seen before. So we don't really know what we're in for, and that's kind of exciting. So
there's a better than even chance that this is going to be a disaster and they're going to wipe our ass because they've got some strategy with the allies that we haven't seen, and maybe we'll be figuring out a way to protect our capitals by turn 3. That's why you play the game.
Right. But we're hoping for the opposite, that perhaps by turn 3 we'll be sipping Earl Grey and chai tea at the same time. So time will tell. And we've reached halfway through turn 1. Not much to report other than that our first rounds went about as we planned them to go, because it's only the first round, so there's not much deviation from the plan yet. Japan has come on through slightly into China, one layer into China. You'll notice one thing did not go according to plan, and that's taking Yunnan. The Chinese put up an incredible resistance there against poor rolls by the Japanese. So did not lose any planes, but did not take the land either. So that's empty. Otherwise, the German rolls went fairly well. It's good in some places, not in others, but did not lose any planes in Sea Zone 110, which is the key thing. Lost the subs, built that Navy there. The Paris rolls went okay. That's what's left. And Russia has responded with a nice spread along the front there, and distribution of forces, waiting to see what comes next on the rest of turn 1. At the beginning of turn 2, now things start to shape up in their own unique little way. U.S. doing pretty clever forward positioning maneuver here, shooting an empty aircraft carrier up to Wake in order to join up with that fighter from the Philippines and consolidate a Navy all here in Wake Island, and obviously building up a little bit of support behind that. Other ships from the Philippines coming down to Anzac. Anzac doing the right economic move, as much as I hate this rule, and I on record as opposing this rule, but nevertheless, the Anzac has the ability to move into those Dutch islands when it's not even at war and get some extra money. It's doing that and reaping the benefits here in the mainland. So China, seeing the Japanese hordes approaching, a lot of orange on that board right there, decided to pull back, regroup here in Shenxi. A little bit of pushback up at the top at Chahar, supported by that fighter. And we've got a nice little nub of Chinese individuals there in the middle of the country. The Brits down here in India doing a bit of consolidation as well. Also, as one does, moving out, taking advantage of those free fighters in Persia as well. In the Mediterranean, this is where it gets interesting. So lack of movement there. Note for posterity, that was a move too quickly for us. We should have done a little bit more aggressive, or at least recalibration there in Africa on behalf of Italy. We didn't do that. Life goes on. The Mediterranean is free of as many UK ships as there used to be. That there's still certainly an Allied presence there with both the French and the remaining UK ships. There was a Taranto move that did not include all of the aircraft from London, just the bomber. So Italy did scramble, rolled actually quite well, and eliminated most of the Brits, and came back and took its own navy back there, taking Greece and southern France. Planes live from the UK there in Malta. Certainly a sizable force there to be reckoned with in Malta, especially with a weakened Italian navy. Italy, historically accurate roles in both Greece and southern France, in that they lost, like 7 infantry, 8 infantry, more than that. They lost everything in northern Italy went into France, and look, there's a tank. In Greece, we flew in and transported 4 more guys. The Albanians went in there. The bomber went in there. Still almost lost against the 4 Greeks. So we're going to reevaluate having Italy fight any more battles going forward. UK, motivated to keep that battleship. So we've got a little bit of a naval buildup there in the London harbor. A radar tower in anticipation of strategic bombing, and a bit of build on the American side in the Atlantic. All in anticipation of what Germany does on round 2. Now halfway through turn 2, we see the Japanese have bought 4 more transports and some artillery to go with them, emptying out the coast as we make our way further and further into China, to having taken 3 spaces there: Yunnan, Qichao, and Chahar. Pressing forward on those fronts, spreading the Air Force through China here, and back on the ships as well, having continued to pile up some transported units down in Quang Sea, but otherwise leaving that Navy down there still in position to go a number of different ways. Not committed to anything on that just yet, but we're pressing forward on that Chinese stack there in Shenxi, and putting some additional pressure on there. European side of the map, as we had gamed out, if in fact the UK put its navy in the London harbor there, the German navy would go after it. That's what's happened. Having taken out that navy there and kind of completed its domination of the northern Atlantic, Germany spent its builds on 9 transports, which ended up in Sea Zone 114. Chris and I will make probably some side comments here during or after the game on how things are shaping up, but it's always interesting. No plan survives contact with the enemy, and we're seeing that on all sides as we continue to inch forward towards a greater conflagration here in Europe. The Russians really building up that front. You see quite a bit of units that we could green chip that up actually in St. Petersburg, and we've got another green chipper down there in Bessarabia, just knocking on Germany's door, begging to be let in. Some mechs over there just waiting to bust out of Kazakhstan. Russia's about to burst here from the pressure building up. Let's see how the rest of the allies react to the German moves on turn 2. We're at the beginning of round 3, and here's how things look. You'll see that the Pacific has no more Americans in it than it did before. In fact, there are fewer because the carrier that was there shot itself over through the Panama Canal. We'll take a look at that in a minute, but there is a kind of standstill on the American presence here. Anzac continuing to just pile up money with these Dutch islands, and by Navy therewith. You saw how Japan ended last turn. UK responded by continuing to build land units, making infantry and artillery builds in Calcutta, but also turning fairly aggressively towards the Middle East and Africa, really gunning for that African victory token, I'd wager, by taking the whole Navy, including people transported out of Persia, up into Ethiopia, where the Italians we forgot to move the first turn were still sitting. So they were wiped out. Took, scooted over to Kenya to be nettlesome there, but otherwise, this time at least remembering to turtle in Tobruk, take Alexandria, things of that nature, just do what the Italians can while they can. In the Med, Italy actually had some good rolls and took care of the French fleet, but there is still an Allied presence in the Mediterranean, which prevents it from getting any bonuses. In the London Isles, we've got a bit of a buildup. We've got a second radar tower now in anticipation of there being strat bombs coming in. So under our rules, it gives up to 5 fighters in the UK extra bonuses when intercepting. There are 4 fighters in there right now with, by the way, some custom builds that Aaron has there that are pretty cool, not gonna lie. And as we suggested, the Americans reacting to Germany's obvious investment in what can only be described as a sea line navy by putting all its builds in some of its Pacific units right there in the Atlantic. So with those Americans staring down over the horizon, how will Germany assert its dominance on turn 3? Middle of turn 3, Japan just got done doing not very much, actually. So we still have not declared war on US, ANZAC, or UK, but what we do have is that Navy and Air Force and land units continuing to pile up in Kwangsi and its suburbs. We purchased a air base and naval base this time around, so that's happening down there. The Russians still not in the war, but we've decided that these Siberians want to knock on the door in Manchuria, which is conspicuously empty. We pulled back a few Chinese troops there to G-Hole to make sure it stays plugged. And Chinese back here with their backs to the border. The Russians, not knowing what's going on or what they're going to do yet in Europe, waiting to see what breaks loose on the German front, but they have consolidated 2 loci of power here in both Leningrad and in western Ukraine. Got 2 mad stacks, inspired in no small part by this consolidation. Everything Germany had left in Eastern Europe is now in Slovakia, Hungary. That's a stack of 20-something infantry and a fair number of tanks as well that have not yet gone anywhere. We purchased a couple more transports and units to go on them for Germany, so that's a total in this consolidated navy of, I think, 12 transports. Is that right?
Yep.
And everybody pulled back from London into Sea Zone 112, except for the Lonely Sub. And that's where the game stands so far in turn 3. Where will the Allies strike next? Beginning of turn 4, things are about to, as they say, get real. So U.S. has, did you build anything? You're just shucking some transports over here, but otherwise kind of hanging out in Hawaii, just kind of holding station. ANZAC now at war, collecting some bonuses, and in the process of just building up Navy and some tanks there in anticipation of potential Japanese landing next time around. We've got some French turtleage there in Malaya and in Calcutta as well by the Indians, but you'll see this one pesky little American ship right there shot up from Sea Zone 54 just to be nettlesome and just in case Japan had any designs on, I don't know, going anywhere south of there, kind of slowing down that progress there. Not to be outdone, mind you, the French shot their shot over here and stuck a little ship from this naval conglomeration here in Sea Zone 98, which, by the way, there's a big Sea Zone conglomeration there. UK going full force into Africa and the Med, combining all of their remaining navy from the Mediterranean and from India here into 98, together with that one surviving French destroyer, which did what it could to wipe out the two naked transports that Italy had so brazenly and perhaps too boldly built there by themselves in its turn. Italy has shot its navy over to Syria and scooted up all its land units over to Alexandria in a show of equal and opposite aggression to what the UK is doing there. Reckless, putting all that on the border there with all those units, all that navy, not buying up defensive units, instead of spending this money on transports. Perhaps. But what else did Italy do? Well, Italy shot its air units that it had, 2 planes and a bomber, into 114. Why did it do that? Well, Russia, as you may have picked up last time, scooted its carrier over there as a blocker. Just a defensive maneuver to keep the Germans at bay from mainland Russia. And Italy shot its planes up there and took care of that. So there's no more blocker in 114. And we have all these Americans bearing down, while the British have really focused all their builds now on London proper, as they have really the entire game, building up a sizable stack of individuals, as well as all of the planes that they could possibly get there from the African front. So there's a whole lot of consideration now about which way the Germans will zig or zag. And this whole game has been a bunch of building up, a bunch of pressure cooker, and it's all about to explode here on turn 4. Now, halfway through turn 4, the Japanese have unleashed their war machine. You'll see some Russians there on the border of a war, haven't gone in. There's some debate over whether they intended to go into Manchuria or not, but we walked some guys back into Manchuria now from G-Hole to defend. There's some builds and some repositioning of the Navy. Some of that Navy was pulled back, a couple things were built, and most critically, a blocker is dropped here in C-Zone 16. On the mainland, this Navy has swung around. It got rid of that American blocker and dumped everything it had. All the land units that can be brought were brought to Burma, both land-wise from Yunnan, as well as by transport and even by paratroop, getting as many units there as possible. Most of Japan's builds were focused on facilities. We've got a military base there in Kwang Si and, or Kwang, whatever that is, and a major factory there in King Su, which, yeah, for all the people who are about to comment and say you can't build a major there, read the house rules. It's worth, it's a 3 value, that's the only place right there it can be built. So we've got still a buildup here, but that buildup has shifted now to the Calcuttan border, and we've gobbled up some goods in Southeast Asia as well, and picked off a couple Anzac transports along the way. Russia and Germany. So Germany deciding that it no longer wanted to have Earl Grey, instead swinging the Navy into the Baltic Sea to invade around about Leningrad. So Leningrad was too built up to support an invasion this turn, but we dumped them all into the Baltic states, supported by the tanks that were on the ground. So Germany's got the bulk of its forces all right here in Baltic states. What are we looking at? So the Russians elected to counterattack with all of their air force into the naval zone while purchasing 2 aircraft carriers. And they're transparent about that. That's because if they couldn't kill the Navy, then they're making room for this large British Air Force that's been turtled up in London waiting for a sea line attack to get there and finish off the Navy, and with it all 12 of those transports. So that is the strategy they have darn well committed to at this point by spending an entire build on a Russian Navy. Certainly unconventional and orthodox, but the unconventional stuff sometimes is just crazy enough to work. So we're about to see whether that holds true here. The Germans otherwise, they've moved every piece that they could on the board, just about getting into there. Russians already getting a bonus now for occupying Finland. They've got some troops down here in southern Europe prepared to gobble up territories that are defenseless. Let's see if we're going to see what happens on the rest of this turn.
Did you do Africa?
Did I do Africa?
I don't think so.
I don't think I did.
The glory of Africa.
Yeah, but that was last turn.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah. We're just really hyped about Africa. So there it is. Check it out. See you next turn. Now at the beginning of turn 5, we've seen, not much action from the Americans. They are continuing to shuck a bit, building some more transports, piling up in Hawaii. Took out the blocker in 16, but otherwise biding their time there. The rest of the action is over this way. The Anzacs building subs, investing all their winnings from the Money Islands into a navy, anticipating some naval activity from the Japanese in coming turns. But they own all 3 of the Dutch Money Islands now. Japan's got to kind of get on that. The Indians, having seen the writing on the wall with all the Japanese next door in Burma, rather than going headlong into Burma or putting up one last valiant grand stand in Calcutta, decided to pull back to West India, not upgrading that factory for me, unfortunately, while the Chinese press their advantage back into the Japanese zones. On this end of the board, the Italians taking Iraq, activating that and the associated bonus, pulling back a bit from Tobruk and clearing the Med for the first time in the game, finally getting rid of that last French ship. So that's fun. They're getting a little bit of bonus, but not getting too comfortable because we've got this American fleet that has decided to make its landing in Morocco. So that's 6 land units, 7 land units, 8 land units, actually a fair number, and planes and whatnot sitting there in C-Zone 91 with a blocker here in anticipation of the German Wolfpack sitting in 112. Now, how did the UK response go? You remember they were invested in this whole Russian aircraft carrier strategy. Well, that happened, and they did in fact come sink the Bismarck finally, and are currently resident in C-Zone 115, along with that German sub. So that plan was carried out, sank the German Navy. Let's see how that works out on turn 5. Halfway through turn 5, the Japanese have, first of all, suffered a major Russian incursion here in Manchuria. And Korea, kind of, inevitable when all of your fleet and army is half a world away on the other side of Asia. That's what happens. So, again, replacing the blocker, couple new builds there, but most of that fleet that was there is now down in the Philippines, which finally is in its rightful Japanese hands. That fleet has swum back over, its job having been done in the Indian Ocean. The land units able to take India because the Indians had stepped back from it. So that's where that lands now. Japan has taken Calcutta's money in hand, all 14 IPCs of it, is now convoying Anzac is what it's reduced to, because it still can't put its hands on the Money Islands yet. But still a sizable force of British there in the western half of India. On the other half of the board, we have the same thing, a Russian aneurysm on the other side as well, with this huge ugly stack of Red Army just gobbling up the empty South European territories, as we kind of knew they would do, but you always hate to see it. Germans having, I want to say handily, but there were some good rolls and some bad rolls, but still a good sizable chunk of German dudes there in Leningrad, now virtually unopposed by Russians anywhere around them. So that's going to be a nice little happy place for the German army, although up here in Nordic land, look at that, some more Russians and some more bonuses. So Russia took like 60 something this turn, which is again what you expect, what's inevitable following the strategy that we pursued, but still painful to see. So let's see what else the Allies have to bring this. Beginning of round 6, we have, as may have been anticipated, some meet up here in the Carolines with the entire Anzac Navy. So far with the Americans, another Anzac Navy, including a carrier now coming along. That's just too much for Australia to have. On the southern end, the Calcuttans have decided to give up on India, march their mad large stack into the Middle East. Italy has gobbled up the Middle East and those bonuses, at least for the time being. UK, as we've seen in the past, has started bringing in those British planes, reinforcing Moscow and Volgograd as well. Got tons of planes over that way. Italy, but transport plane and guy to start reinforcing, doing what it can in that neighborhood. The Americans, we have this fleet still down here, but a much larger one here. So that blow-up box is represented by the smaller square. So there's all of that Navy is now in C-Zone 110. There's even some French dudes on those empty transports just to take advantage of the space. U.S. is holding on to Holland and Normandy, earning them yet another bonus. The U.S. is earning in the mid-80s IPC-wise at the moment, and with some more follow-up Navy to come in the Atlantic. So time for Axis to figure out how it's going to keep up the momentum on turn 6. Well, halfway through turn 6, Japan finally got to do what it's been building up to do, which primarily here involves wiping out the combined U.S. Anzac fleet in the Carolines. So they had a big and impressive looking Navy, but with the amount of both naval and air units that Japan was able to summon, they were within range of that whole Navy, both the 2 carrier groups in 36, the 1 carrier group in 35, plus a couple additional planes that were able to make it from the land and have a landing spot. So they brought all of that in and had some pretty effective results here against the Allied fleet. So now we have not complete ownership, but certainly domination here in the Pacific. There's a carrier group down in Sydney. There's a carrier group in San Francisco, a couple things in Hawaii, but balance of power definitely tilting in Japan's favor here. The Russians hold up in Korea, but we've got some Japanese now eating in from Siberia. We had just Japanese exploding everywhere here, taking out Anhui. Didn't end up occupying, but only lost infantry, took out the stack of 12 plus the fighter, the Tiger Squadron there that was there. Swinging back up to Yunnan. 3 of the 4 Money Islands actually ended up failing the invasion of Celebes, but nevertheless, some good stuff there. Taking West India to get the first victory token of the game. Unfortunately, the technology rolled was rockets, which has literally 0 value for Japan, which is kind of sucks, but what are you going to do? On the European map, Germany is doing its best to hold on to its gains as much as possible while stealing itself from a much stronger Allied position here in the Atlantic with this huge Navy still there. The folks in 91 There's a lot of naval power projection and air power up here for the Allies, not to mention just this horrible infection of Soviets. This horrible breakout down here all the way to Slovakia, northern Italy, taken by the Soviets this time around, adding up to just a crap ton of bonuses for the Russians. They're collecting again in the 60s for the second or third turn in a row. So we're going to need some prescription strength reaction from the Allies to get rid of that rash coming up. All right, beginning of turn 7, the Pacific looks still admirably Japanese. It withheld counterattacks from both the Americans and the entire Anzac Navy and Air Force. Certainly whittled down, but the capital ships remain. Lost some Air Force, lost some other ships. Still looking good down there for the Japanese. Calcuttans continue to withdraw from West India, while the British populating it did. Air Force all through Russia here and beefing up its defenses. Italy, a little jab into the Caucasus there, not to pretend like they're going to live very long, but they are going to go out swinging. Even the French are getting into the game, taking territory in Africa. Meanwhile, the Americans and British keep pouring into Europe. They've got Denmark now, Holland, and Normandy again, although this time it took the British to get that one. Turn 7 coming up. Halfway through turn 7, and Japan's expansion continues. We had a little bit more gobbling here in the Far East. We had a bit of a hiccup not being able to take all of Shantung, but we certainly whittled down that stack. Didn't lose any planes. Spent the 5 infantry there, built some more stuff. Expanding out freely now into southern China with just open road ahead. Completed the acquisition of the Money Islands, was able to retreat the capital ships back to friendlier waters. Not only that, but we took Malaya, Dutch New Guinea, and even the Gilbert Islands all at once here, which has the effect of neutering every one of Anzac's bonuses. So these ridiculous navies that they've been building hopefully will now come to an end. On the European map, the Russians and Germans trading a lot of fire. Germans did a great job of recovering all the territories that had been taken by the Allies, just about, at least on the coast, and several of the Russian incursions. Russia pushing back, putting that massive stack now into Yugoslavia, abutted by some large German stacks as well. And, well, the Allies have a lot they can do here on the rest of turn 7. Beginning of turn 8, the Americans have built most of their builds into the Pacific, kind of reassembling a Pacific fleet in the Hawaiian Islands. A little bit more modest than last time, but then the Japanese fleet is a tad more modest as well. I think we talked about what the Japanese did already. So the Anzacians building up a bit of a navy with only 10 IPCs coming in now, so they've got only modest growth ahead of them. The Indians, well, there are no Indians anymore, but the British anyway, gobbling up what remained of the Italians' bonuses in the Middle East, which cuts into Italy's income, especially since the U.S. is popping a ship into the Med as well. However, the Italians did kind of scoot over into Libya and just ate some bullets that the French shot into them. So they're whittling away here, but trying to hang on to some territory in North Africa, while also, though, much more successfully retaking a couple European territories from Russia, the Russians who stand now kind of in the midst of Axis territory, being surrounded as they are. The Brits retaking Normandy, holding on to that for the time being. Whole mess of naval units remain in 110, a little too much for the Germans to sink. And we do have a bit of transport capacity coming at us from the Americas. So really at a standstill here on the western front of Europe. Kind of a bloodbath on the eastern front, but kind of reasserting itself, kind of coming back to full circle, the original borders almost here, probably by the end of the next turn. And that's where we stand at the beginning of turn 8. All right, Internet. So you're not going to like this, but we are ending the game at a draw at this point. Reason being, we've got time limitations. This is a game that we've played all in one day. We got folks that need to return home and not come back tomorrow. So all of our kind of assistants have peeled away during the course of the game. There's the 4 of us.
And it's 3 o'clock in the morning.
And it's 3 o'clock in the morning, with an hour drive ahead of some of us. So here's where the game stands at more or less the standstill. You just saw the video wrapping up the state of the game here at the beginning of turn 8. In Germany, as I hinted, and as we've been sitting around the table discussing, there's like 100% chance odds that this huge Russian stack in Yugoslavia is going to get wiped out. We're going to clean up the rest out of Southern Europe. So, and Chris is going to kick the UK out of Normandy like for the 3rd time. So we're really back to square one. Right after 7 turns, Germany and Russia are more or less going to be at their original borders because Germany's pulling back out of Leningrad. UK's got a bigger, at least a differently situated navy. US certainly has more of a presence here, but not penetrating much. The Allies now have a factory in Egypt they just built last turn. Italy's not making any headway there in Northern Africa, so they'll eventually get their Africa token probably in a couple turns. The other side of the board, the Pacific side, Japan's really got no impediments left. I mean, they got a couple nuts they got to crack here in Shantung and Korea, but they're kind of holed up again. I mean, Shantung's probably going to get wiped up this time around with these transports coming in and the other guys already on the ground. Got some air support to bring in. So that'll get cleaned up while these guys start mopping up the rest of China. China's bills will start slowing down. But, you know, it'll take a few turns to do that. We've got some guys slowly crossing through Siberia, but we got a nice little navy here in Philippines. Got a lot of transport support even after the sub attacks. So really the next target for Japan to turn to is Australia. They're getting 10 IPCs a turn. They've got a modest little navy and very, very few land units. So we're not, you know, super heavy on units to bring in, but we can start dropping them and start building up and getting a foothold, kind of Python swallow Australia one bit at a time. And eventually I think that'll come. And once that happens, that's 2 more tokens, because that's our 6th victory city, and Sydney itself is a token. So that puts the axis at 3, but it's going to take a while at the speed we're going, especially because the U.S. is going to start pouring more money into the Pacific, and they've got a lot of transports, and they'll probably react by bringing those transports down to Queensland, and now we've got a fight. It's basically the U.S. and Japan fighting over Australia. So that's going to take a while. What would that 4th victory token be? Maybe it's getting rid of the surface warships. But again, even though Japan's going to make a ton of money, that's still not an easy thing to pull off. And maybe U.S. puts enough into it that that doesn't happen. Maybe the economic grind on the European map means that with their new tech they get out of their Africa token and all these transports that the UK has and just dropping guys every turn, You know, maybe they finally crack through and liberate Paris, or maybe they weaken Germany's defenses enough that they get through and just turn the tide, and Germany eventually collapses. That, you know, often happens too. So we leave it to you, dear viewers, to consider what we've argued here, decide who it is that's got the advantage or who should be declared the winners. But I have to say, after an entire day, starting early morning and now till 3 in the morning the same night, this epic showdown between Chris and Brian's Axes versus Aaron and Mike's Allies has come to what we consider a draw. Gentlemen, anything else you want to kick in?
Just one thing, because I'm sure the internet's going to say that I don't know how to sea line because we bought all those transports and we had to move them way out of position. And I just want to say that you're absolutely correct. I don't know how to do that because that was fucking terrible. But what we discovered is that we had misallocated because we didn't leave fighters back to protect those transports, and they could have bought a carrier here and ended up reaching them, which we did not calculate for the carrier, or I didn't, and so that was just a mistake. Otherwise, I think we had London if we didn't blow the stupid placement of the transports.
Could have sea lined on G3, except we were forced to place those in 114 because we didn't end up having the support we thought we did. We thought we could get away with building naked transports in 113 because their planes couldn't possibly reach. But had they had purchased a carrier, which they would have done because they did the same thing later with Russia, they would have wiped us out.
You know, but that pooch was probably equal in comparison to the kill box over there. That was like a 100-point IPC swing in the Pacific that opened that board up.
Sinking that whole Allied Navy.
You know, stuff happens in the course of the game. But yes, I'm bad at doing that.
Well, mistakes were made. Mistakes were made.
Look, knocking the rust off. That's what happens when we don't play enough.
You're right. Yeah, we play this game once or twice a year, so give us a break, people.
What did you guys think of the
Aaron, Mike?
Tom? So, yeah.
Their first time playing our rules.
It's a lot of rules, but it is enjoyable.
I'm learning the rules. Yeah.
It's when you play good players, it's hard to really get an edge.
Yeah.
It's some dice, and then just if somebody makes a major foobar, the other side jumps on it.
For sure.
You don't get away with much.
Which, I mean, makes it fun, right? Because it's a pretty high intensity game all day long. All right, well, that's what we've got here at the end of 7 rounds. Hope you enjoyed the show, and see ya at the next one. Peace.